Yeah, so let's get started. Today we will discuss more about the configuration files. Okay, so before we go to the configuration files, we just recap what we discussed yesterday with the diagrammatic representation. So whenever we initialize the cluster with initdb, so we have defined a data directory. In that data directory, we know it will create a subdirectories, right? Important subdirectories, which contains all files like data files, control files, wall files, and so on, right? And if you're not mention any data directory, by default, it will go to varlib and default location, right? So whenever you mention your customized location, it will create all um, under that folder, whatever you have mentioned. Okay, so this under this data directory, as discussed, we have a base, a global, PG wall. Okay, so these are the important subdirectories which we are talking about. And while going, okay, you will understand each and every subfolder. So for now, we need to just remember that base, global, and PG wall are the main important subdirectories which we discussed yesterday. So the base contains default table spaces, template 0, template 1, and Postgres, right? And also you can create your own customized databases. And we also have default table space inside inside this data directory, PG global and PG default. So all the three default databases by default.
We should share something. We can see like only slide.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, just share because I'm just sharing in the Paint actually. So yeah, are you able to see my Paint? No.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So here, yeah, these are the main important directories which I'm talking about. So inside the data directory, we have global, base, and configuration files and PG wall. So under the base directory, we have default databases, template 0, template 1, and Postgres. So yesterday we have seen these are the three default databases. Along with that, we can also have our own customized or user-defined databases. Okay, whenever you create any databases, by default, it will go to PG default table space. So we have PG default table space, and by default, it will go to PG default. Even the three databases, default databases also resides under PG default table space. Okay. Template 0 and template 1 we can consider as system databases because yeah, so because these are the important databases which we discussed yesterday, this is used for template. So template 0 is not right. We cannot do anything. So template 1 is it used as a template. So whenever you create any user-defined databases, it will take template as template 1 and it will create. So template 0, why we need template 0 and template 1, two databases? Because if template 1 is gone, okay, we have another database template 0. So with the help of template 0, you can create template 1. Okay. So, and your user-defined databases. Along with this, we have Postgres database, right? So Postgres database having two schemas, okay? One is public and PG catalog, okay? So PG catalog is hidden schema. You cannot able to see with /dn or with any commands, okay? But you can able to select the data inside this. So it has all the system defined catalog based tables, okay, like PG class, PG tables, PG users, PG roles, and so on. Okay, this all resides under PG catalog schema. And we have public schema. Okay, this is the whenever you create any tables, okay, by default it will go to public schema. Okay, if you not mention any so any kind of schema name, okay, by default it will go to public. So it's not recommended to go in the public schema. Okay, and we also create our user-defined schemas as well. Okay, so these are the three default databases. By default, it will come whenever you initialize the cluster. Apart from this, we also have two default table spaces like PG default and PG global. And we have one more subdirectory called global. So this all comes under base. Okay, so inside the base we have template 1, template 0 and Postgres, this will be visible with OID, object ID. Okay. And we have global. Okay. Inside the global, we have dictionary tables, global dictionary tables. So global means it will applicable for all databases. So Postgres, template 1, template 0, and also if you create any user-defined databases, this global dictionary tables will be applicable. Example, PG database, PG underscore table space, and so on. So these are the examples of your global dictionary tables. So this resides under global subdirectory. And also you have control file here. Okay, so you also have control file, and we know how to read the control file with the help of control control data file utility. You can able to read this control file. Okay. And today we are going to discuss more about the configuration files. So here, apart from these two subdirectories, we also have important configuration files like hpa.conf, postgresql.conf, auto.conf, and ident.conf. Okay, so today we'll discuss more about these configuration files. And we also have pgvol. So inside the pgvol, we have each pgvol file generates with 16 MB. Okay, so this is vol1, vol2, vol2 also 16 MB, vol3, 16 MB, and so on. So how much it will generate up to whenever it reaches 1 GB, until that it's keep on generating the vol files. Each vol file will have 16 MB of size. Okay, once it reaches 1 GB, again it will overwrite all the data from vol1. If you not enable your RKLogs, then you will no longer recover that data. So that's why it's always good to enable your database in RKlog mode. Once the 16 MB is full, the vol1 data will be flushed into RKlogs. Okay. And even though if it, after reaching 1 GB it overwrites, there is no problem. Okay. So today we are going to discuss more about these configuration files. For now, we need to just remember base, global, pgvol are the main important, which have all the data files, control files, dictionary objects, as well as pgvol. Okay, vol files and configuration files. So today we are going to discuss more about the configuration files. So these are the agenda about the configuration files. So first we'll discuss overview of the configuration files and what is PostgreSQL.conf and how to change any parameters for the entire Postgres cluster. Okay, and difference between Oracle and PostgreSQL in terms of parameter files, and we also discuss what are the types of configuration types changes we have. Okay, either static or dynamic, and how we can change those parameters. And we also have auto.conf. What is the importance of auto.conf? We'll discuss, and pgident.conf, pghpa.conf, and we also have a tool called pgtune, which is very important tool. Most of the real-time systems, they will use this pgtune. So we'll discuss this these modules today. Okay, so these are the overview of our PostgreSQL configuration files. So we have hpa.conf, ident.conf, PostgreSQL.conf, auto.conf, and postmaster.opts and PG version. Okay, along with the three configuration files, we also have PG version and postmaster.opts. Okay, these are the two files which we could see under PG data directory. Okay, so what is a PG version? So PG version is just a major version of our PostgreSQL. So it stores our PostgreSQL major version value in the PG version file. Okay, and we have pghpa.conf. In the pghpa.conf, we control all our client authentications. Okay, if you build a Postgres cluster, if you want to allow any of the clients, you have to allow in the hpa.conf. Otherwise, they cannot able to connect to the server, Postgres instance or server. Okay, so we have to allow the connections, client connections from hpa.conf. We also have pgident.conf. This is like your OS authentication in Oracle. So if you want to allow any OS users, okay, to connect to the database without any password, they can able to authenticate with the OS credentials, okay, OS account or OS password. Okay, so we have a file called pgident.conf where you can allow the OS user to database user. So you can map. For example, you have a OS user called SkyOps, okay? And you have a database user called Sky, okay? If you want to map both OS user and database user, you can define in the pgident.conf and you can allow that particular user to cluster, okay? So this kind of authentication, we call it as a OS authentication that we have to define in pgident.conf. And we have postgresql.conf, which is the parameter files. Okay, all your cluster related parameter files resides under postgresql.conf with default values once you initialize the cluster. So later point of time, you have to change all the parameters based on your resources, your system resources. Okay. And we have one more file called auto.conf. So auto.conf also have parameters. Whenever you change any value with the alter system command, this auto.conf will be updated. Okay, it has the new version of your postgresql.conf. So whenever you initialize the cluster, Postmaster will read postgresql.conf first, and later it will read auto.conf. So auto.conf is a new version of your postgresql.conf. Okay, that we will understand clearly, even practically. Okay. And we have postmaster.opts. So this is whenever you start any cluster, okay, that log will be saved in the postmaster.opts. Okay, this is just a just a log which saves whenever you start your last cluster, those details will be stored under the postmaster.opts file. Okay, apart from this, it doesn't have any information. It just have whenever you start your cluster, it has when it started and checkpoint information. Those information we have in the postmaster.opts. So we'll go deep. Each configuration file. So as discussed, postgresql.conf is one of the important configuration file which has all your database configuration settings like max underscore connections, wall underscore work underscore memory, okay, wall size, all your parameters resides under postgresql.conf, which have a bunch of parameters based on your requirement. Once you build a cluster based on your requirement, you have to change your configuration files. Okay, so it also have static and dynamic parameters as usual like Oracle. So whatever the parameters is static, you require a cluster bounce. Whatever the dynamic parameters, you can do on the fly. Okay, so whenever you initialize your cluster, it copies a default postgresql.conf which have a basic parameters. Okay, just to start the cluster, it only have some basic parameters. So later point of time, you have to change all the necessary parameters which is required. Okay, and this postgresql.conf have a format. Okay, it has a parameter value, and they also mention in that parameter whether this parameter requires a restart or not. Even we can also identify with pg underscore settings view whether it's a static or dynamic. Okay, and in that parameter also they will clearly mention whether it's really required a restart or we can change on the fly. Okay, in the same file they will mention clearly about that parameter. Even they will give a small description about that parameter. Okay, so as discussed, most of the parameters need a restart of our cluster because most of them are especially memory related parameters or static parameters, we require a bounce of that particular parameters. And we need to keep in mind this parameter file postgresql.conf is for cluster level. Okay, if you change any parameter, it applicable for all databases. Okay, like how in Oracle CDB and BDB, you have parameter file for entire CDB level, right? In the same way, you have postgresql.configuration file at the cluster level. So which required if you change any parameter, it will also reflect to all databases that parameter. So these are the few differences between Oracle and Postgres configuration file. So if you want to check location of your parameter file, you use show parameter SP file. So it will give your SP file location. In Postgres, you give show config underscore file. Okay, it will give your postgresql.conf location. It resides under the pg data directory. And if you want to check any parameter value, you give show parameter SGA max size like this, right? In Postgres, you don't need to mention parameter. You have to just give show shade underscore buffer. It will give the value of your parameter. Currently, what is the value? Okay. And if you want to find out whether your parameter is okay, so from $v parameter, you can able to find more information of your parameter like SGA value, PGA, and so on in Oracle. Similar way, we have PG underscore settings in Postgres where you can able to find the name of the parameter and value. Whether you can do show parameter name, or you can also check from PG underscore settings. What is the value? And in the same view, you can also find whether the parameter is a static or dynamic. So in Oracle, we have is modifiable column where you can able to identify whether it's a static or dynamic. You will decide based on this parameter, right? So if it is immediate, it is a dynamic parameter. If it is a false, it is static in Oracle. Similarly, we have a column in Postgres for PG underscore settings, which is context. Okay. So if your output of context is postmaster, then this is static parameter. You require a bounce back. Apart from this, if you have the context parameter output value is seek hub, then it is a dynamic parameter. You can change it on the fly, but only you need is reload of your configuration file. That's it. So you don't need to shut down entire cluster and start the cluster. Okay.
So the PG underscore settings is the view of the parameter file. Whatever the values which we are setting in the PostgreSQL.conf, those values we can see in the view of PG underscore settings, right?
Yes, exactly. So you have name comma settings context from $v PG underscore settings where name equal to, for example, shared buffers. Okay? So it will give the name of the parameter value. Settings means it will give the value, and it will also give whether it's a static parameter or dynamic parameter with the context. Okay? If your output is postmaster, then this is a static parameter. You required shut down the cluster and start the cluster. If the output is seek hub, then this is a dynamic parameter. You can change on the fly. So apart from postmaster and seek hub, we also have a few more outputs for context like super user. Okay, those can be changed after reload. Okay, those will reflect. You only need to think whenever your context output is postmaster, then it requires downtime. Apart from postmaster, if you get any output like seek hub, user, super user, so you can change on the fly, okay, which you can treat as a dynamic parameter. Yeah. Any doubts in this slide? Yeah. So, and we know how to change parameter, right? So we change in Oracle like alter system set parameter equal new parameter. We have scope equal to SP file and so on. But here you don't have like scope things. Okay. You only need to set a parameter, alter system set parameter equal to value. Either you can do with alter system set command, or you can directly go and edit in PostgreSQL.conf and you can change the value and you can save that file. Okay. This is how you can change in Postgres. But if you change the value with alter system set command, the value will update in PostgreSQL.autoconf, not in conf. Okay, you have to remember that. Whenever you change any parameter with alter system set, the value will be updated in PostgreSQL.auto.conf. Okay, that is a new version of your parameter value. But if you see the same parameter in PostgreSQL.conf, it will be the old value. Okay, so we have two configuration files here, auto.conf and conf. Auto.conf will be updated when you do with alter system set command. Okay, and dynamic this is a static parameter. You have to, once you set this alter system set command, you have to stop the cluster and start the cluster. Okay, and if your parameter is a dynamic parameter, in Oracle you use scope equal to both and it will reflect immediately. But in Postgres, after you do alter system set parameter to new value, okay, you have to reload your configuration file. Select the pgreload_conf. This is the query which you can reload, or you can also do with pgctl reload -d data directory. So it will not stop your cluster. It will just reload. It will just read the parameters of the PostgreSQL.conf, and it will see if any changes and it will apply. So we need to just reload the configuration file if it is a dynamic. If you forget to reload after you change, it will be old value. Okay, so we should always reload your configuration file once, even though it is a dynamic parameter. Okay, you have to reload it. Okay, and so even you can change few parameters at session level, right? So that we'll see. So even in Postgres also we can change few parameters at the session level, and even we can change at database level, even we can change at the user level. Okay, so that we will see.
One question, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, the context here is mentioned as user, right? So the static parameters would be postmaster, right?
Yes.
There will be user, and what is the Sci-Hub? I read this.
Yeah, SIG-Hub. It is SIG-Hub. It is a if your output is SIG-Hub, it is a dynamic parameter. Okay, SIG-Hub, user, super user, all these are all. It will reflect for the new session, we can say, or after you reload your configuration files, it will applicable, which we can call it as a dynamic parameters.
All right. So your should the below query be context equals context in Sci-Hub and user?
Sorry, you can you repeat your question?
All right, never mind. I'll ask you later.
Okay, fine.
And Suresh, here we are talking about the autoconf, right? Whenever we are changing any system level parameter for the static one, it will be updating on PostgreSQL.autoconf, right? And when it will be writing to the PostgreSQL.conf, immediately it will be writing from auto.conf.
No, it will not write. It will not write in PostgreSQL.conf. It is a new version. Okay, it will not write back to your. If your PostgreSQL.autoconf by mistake, if you remove all the parameters inside that, okay, then whenever you start your cluster, it will only read PostgreSQL.conf, which has your old values. Okay, it will not have any new values. Okay. So that is the reason. That is, we can say, one drawback. Okay, so in Postgres, if you change any parameters with auto system command, you should maintain the new version value. You should take a backup of that always. By mistake, if auto.conf is gone, then your parameters, all the new version of parameters will be gone. So you will need to depend on your old PostgreSQL.conf. It is just a new version of your parameters, we can say. Okay, so you have to manage.
If you are querying via pg_setting, the values will be fetching from PostgreSQL.conf or autoconf, where it will be fetching.
Both it will fetch. Okay, first it will look for PostgreSQL.conf, and later it will check whether the new version is available in auto.conf. If your value is in the auto.conf, it will fetch from that.
So during the cluster starting phase only, it will not consider the newer version. It will only looking for the PostgreSQL.conf. That's what you are saying, right?
No. It will read both the files. Whenever you start the cluster, first it will read PostgreSQL.conf, and then it will also read auto.conf later. First it will read PostgreSQL.conf and auto.conf. So it will apply the settings whatever we have in auto.conf. Okay.
Yeah, actually we can say this way, like auto.conf is the latest version of your parameter. Okay, so it means latest changes will be there into the auto.conf parameter, but PostgreSQL.conf is like, maybe we can consider this a master file. Okay, so while like reading, okay, it will read both the parameters. Okay, internally PostgreSQL will compare, okay, the parameter file like PostgreSQL.conf and PostgreSQL.auto.conf. If the same parameter, suppose like shared_buffer, okay, you change the value. Initially, shared_buffer value may be like 100 MB, okay, or maybe 1 GB in PostgreSQL.conf. You change it from like 100 MB to like 200 MB, okay. That value like by using the alt set command. Okay, that value will be available in auto.conf, postgresql.auto.conf with the 200 value, and the same value will be there in postgresql.conf with 100 value. It will refer the both values, but the latest value it will pick, means it is useful whenever if you perform like show that parameter shade underscore buffers. Okay, you will get the 200 value, and the 200 value it is picking from auto.conf. It means every time the latest value PostgreSQL internally picked from postgresql.auto.conf, but the base value, okay, the base value for this entered parameter is referring and it is stored in postgresql.conf. Why? Because it is maintaining auto.conf is, okay, if something happened to the postgresql.conf file, okay, it is very hard to recover. Okay, it is a huge huge parameter file, right? And also if you're trying to modify something on postgresql.conf file, okay, so even you are unable to start your cluster also. That we will show you now.
Yeah. So by mistake, whenever you are editing any parameter directly with the v-editor in a postgresql.conf, if by mistake, if any junk character or some character, if you insert and if you try to restart your cluster, it won't start. Okay, that is very sensitive file. We should be very careful whenever we are doing changes directly with the v-editor. So that is the reason they have introduced a new file auto.conf. You can change the parameters with auto system set command instead of going and directly editing in the v-editor. Okay, so that the new versions will be stored under auto.conf. So, but even we can think that is like advantage and also disadvantage. Disadvantage is you have to manage both the files. Okay, and if you reset all the parameters with auto system set reset, all the parameters will be reset in auto.conf. Okay, again you have your old versions. Okay.
So to take the backup of those files, is there any like system level command is there, or we need to take
No,
from OS
only
level?
with the OS copy command you can take those backups.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, follow-up question, please.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
would I be right to assume that PostgreSQL file is read first and then the auto file is read second, because that is how precedence takes place?
Yeah, you mean to say first it will read postgresql.conf and then later auto.conf? That's what you mean?
Yeah, that's what I'm assuming based on the logic, because if I start my PostgreSQL instance and let's say a parameter value in PostgreSQL is, let's say 10, and in auto.conf it is 20. So it would show me 20, right?
Yes, in the database level it will show 20 only. If you do show parameter that value, it will show 20 because that is a new version and it will read from auto.conf.
So am I right in logically understanding that auto.conf is read later and that is why 20 would precede 10?
Yes.
Exactly correct. Yeah, so exactly correct. See, while starting the cluster, so it is referring the both file, but the PostgreSQL will consider, okay, what is the value is available. Okay, what is the value available in auto.conf. Okay, that is the latest value, the latest version of your modified value.
Yeah, it will read that from that value. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
No, like again the same question. When we are starting the Intel cluster, that time maybe it will refer the PostgreSQL conf file first, then later it may refer the auto conf file. But when the cluster is up, when we are querying something, then first it will read the auto.conf value, right? Or it will read the .conf value, then it will read the auto.conf value. There like any?
yeah, it will read auto.conf. Okay. First it will read like how first it will check that auto.conf have any parameters. If it is not having any parameters, then it will go and pick from conf.
Okay, during the installation it's vice versa.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, while starting the cluster,
is vice versa. Okay.
Yeah.
It is managed internally. I think Gopi. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any specific background process managing for these things, Rupesh?
Background process, okay, we have backend process, right? So that
The use
process
of
we will
backend process,
manage.
the same one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have PG underscore settings catalog table to see whether your parameter is a static parameter or dynamic parameter. Okay. And we also have PG file settings. Okay. We can use this both settings. This will provide a summary of your configuration files, whether it is reading, whether your parameter having updated value in the auto.conf or conf file. It will give us a summary information as well. PG file settings. You can use both the views to get information. PG underscore settings, PG file settings. So the PG file settings, it will give which configuration files it is currently reading. Okay, whether auto.conf or conf file. Okay, and you can also check various details like a value and context details. Okay, so we'll see practically about this view to understand better. So as discussed, okay, if you want to modify any parameter, you can directly go on edit in PostgreSQL.conf, or you can also edit with auto system set command. Okay, and these are the these are the best practices. Whenever you modify any parameter, before that, please, it's good to have backup. If it is a production, okay, it's better to take a backup, and then you can go and edit any parameter in PostgreSQL.conf directly with the VA editor. Okay. Or if you want to edit with the alter system command, you don't want to touch this, you can do with the alter system set command. So before that, you have to check whether it's really required a restart or not, and then you can apply that parameter. Okay, and if it requires a restart, then you have to restart your cluster. So these are the series of steps which we follow before you modify. First, you decide whether you. So few people, what happened? They will maintain only one file if they don't want to manage two files. So they will simply go and edit in PostgreSQL.conf without any alter system set command. And few people, okay, if they think, so we can manage both the files, okay, then they will go with alter system set command. It depends on the company policies and the rules which they define. So they will go, okay, which parameter we need to change and which we should not change. Because as discussed, if this is a very sensitive file, if you insert any junk character or something, entire cluster will get affected. Okay, so
majority which method they will follow, Suresh?
Majority they will follow both. They will use alter system set command. Okay, because it's easy to change instead of going into the auto.conf. And few people, okay, they will manage only one file. Like they will take a copy before they modify, and they will modify and they will save. So it depends. If you have very junior DBAs, okay, if you feel like if your team lead is not comfortable to change directly here, so he will suggest to go with alter system set. So it entirely depends on your team and how it works. Okay, based on the seniority of your DBAs, okay, they will provide this kind of changes. Okay, so even we can change the settings at the cluster level. So we can change with alter system set, for example, work mem to this value. Okay, and we can also change parameters at the database level. We can also change parameters at the user level and at the session level. Okay, so different levels we can change the parameter, but it's not recommended to change at the database level, session level, and at the user level. Whenever you are performing any, for example, major activity vacuuming for this database, so at that moment, for temporarily, you can change. For example, workmem, you required a more memory, right, to process the vacuuming process. So that time you can change, and again you can go, you can roll back. Okay, so at that moment only we have to change the parameters at the database level and session level. Okay, for example, you are performing a huge sorting and merging. Okay, you require more memory, workmem to do sorting. So at that moment you can set at the session level this memory, and once done, this memory will be again deallocated, right? Because it's at the session level. Okay, so but not all the parameters it will allow to change at the database level, session level, and transaction level. Very few parameters, okay, can be changed at the database, session level, and transaction level. Not all. It will not allow everything. Okay, So that we'll see which parameters it will allow at the database level, session level, and transactional level. Okay. And most of the parameters we have to change at the cluster level. It will applicable for all the databases. This is how we can change. And then, as discussed, we have auto.conf. Whenever you do any parameters with the alter system command, this value will be updated. Okay. And whenever you restart, so whenever if you want to reset that particular parameter, you can just do auto system set reset. So for example, you change a parameter with auto system set that parameter value to new value. Again, you don't want this parameter, you have to reset that. You can just do auto system reset that parameter so that it will reset to the old value. Then it will read from PostgreSQL.conf. Okay. And if you want to reset all the parameters from auto.conf, then you can do auto system reset all. Okay, it will roll back to the previous. It will go to the previous versions. It will delete all the parameters in auto.conf.
Now reset all will do the previous value, or it will go to the default value?
It will go to the default value, whatever there in the PostgreSQL.conf.
Okay.
Okay, all the parameters will be deleted from auto.conf. And one more important thing is we should not change any parameters manually in the auto.conf. You cannot directly open vEditor, and it's not recommended to change any parameters. You always need to change with auto system set command. Okay, these parameters. You should not go and edit in the auto.conf. You can do in the conf, but not in auto.conf. You have to only change settings with auto system set command. Okay, so that is about PostgreSQL.conf and auto.conf. Apart from this, we also have one more configuration file called pgident.conf. So in this pgident.conf, if you want to map any OS user to the database user, you can define here. Okay, and once you define in the pgident.conf, you also need to allow in the hpa.conf. Okay, so this is just like your OS authentication. Okay, even Postmaster will read this file during the start of your cluster. Okay. And if you map any users, OS users to the database users, then it will read this and it will allow those connections to access the database. Okay. And so the operating system user, it may be same or may not. So for example, you have operating system user SkyOps. You don't need to have same user in the database. Okay. In the database, you may have different user, even though you can map them. From SkyOps to, for example, you have a user called sales. Okay, even you can map that user SkyOps to sales. Okay, you don't need to be a same user. You can change. It may be different users. You can map. Okay, and you, as discussed, you also need to update whatever you are mapping in ident.conf. The same you have to allow in the hpa.conf. Okay, because that user, if you not allow, then Postgres cluster will reject the connection. Okay, you have to allow that connection in hpa.conf. Okay, then only that OS user can able to access the database user objects. Okay, this is the example how the sample ident.conf looks like. For example, the map name can be any name. Here you can give any name, and this is my OS user. This is my Postgres database user. For example, OS user, I have R Martin. I'm going to map this user to sales. This is a database user. So whenever Martin log into the operating system Linux account, he can able to access the database user sales. Okay, because I mapped these two users, and the same user I have to allow in hpa.conf. And for example, Jepni, okay, I mapped with sales. Editor, I mapped with sales. Editor, I also mapped with Postgres. So editor user have both access for sales and Postgres. Like this, you can map end-to-end mapping, okay? Whatever users you want, you can map in this ident.conf. Okay, so, and also you need to allow in hpa.conf to get the access for this particular user. And one more important configuration file is hpa.conf. Okay, so this is the file where you can control the client connections. So by default, whenever you initialize the cluster, the outside users or outside world cannot able to connect until you change few parameters and you allow in hva.conf. Okay, even we in practical we'll see this example. Okay, once you initialize the cluster, outside users cannot able to access until you allow the connections. Okay, and here you are controlling the host based authentication. Either you can allow a set of IP range or even you can allow a specific IP. For example, I have a client IPs 192.168.1.0 and so on, that series, that CIDR format. Okay, if you want to allow all that IPs, you can define that range in hpa.conf so that application team can connect and access to the database. If you're not allowing in hpa.conf, they cannot able to connect to the database. And in pghpa.conf, you have different authentication methods and different columns where you can see that. For example, this is the example. Okay, you have type, database, user, address, and method. Okay, in the type, you have to define host. Host means it's a remote host. If you mention local host, it is the local host. Okay, which means you are only eligible to connect from the local machine. Host means you are allowing from remote. Okay, whether you want to allow a specific database or all database. You want to allow a specific user or all the users. You have to define here. Okay, and address. This is the address which I'm talking about. You have to define the IP addresses range in the CIDR format, whether you are allowing 32 range or 24 range. It depends on this IP which you are going to configure. Okay, this we call it as a subnet mask, right? So network mask, in that subnet, it allows usually 250, 256.256.256 and so on. So based on that range, you have to define here. Okay, and authentication method. So basically here by default, it is a trust. Now you start the cluster. It also give a warning that current method is trust. Later you have to change this to other algorithms. Like we have MD5, Scrum SHA 256, password, we have reject, so on. We have so many algorithms, so that we will see in the coming slides. This is just a simple example how the pghpa.conf looks like.
What is the IPv4 and IPv6, Suresh? What is the difference between the connections?
It depends, right? If you by default it will be like IPv4, right? So if you have to allow in IPv4 for any application kind. So few times you will also have IPv6, right? So that time you will use the IPv6. You will allow IPv6. Otherwise, by default it will pick IPv4 connections.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll see each and every column type, right? So here we are discussing about this column, the type. So the type may be your local connection or remote connection. Okay. Host means you are allowing a remote connections. Local means this is only for the Linux local session. Okay. From remote, you cannot able to log in. This is for local. Okay. And you also have host SSL. This is for if you are allowing any remote connection with SSL connection. Okay. That time you have to use host SSL here. Okay. Instead of host, local host, you also have host SSL. This is mainly for if you are using any cloud flavor of Postgres like RDS or Cloud SQL. So by default, it will you have to connect with SSL, right? So at that moment, hpa.conf, they will define with host SSL. Okay, with SSL only you have to connect to the Postgres cluster. This is for security. Okay. Even in our security class, we will show how we can configure the cluster with SSL configurations and how we allow the SSL configurations, SSL connections. And this is about the database column. In the database, if you want to allow a specific database, you can define the database, or by default, it will be all, which means the client can able to access all databases. Okay, if you want to restrict, I don't want to give access to this user for this database, you can only allow that specific database by defining in the database column. Okay, otherwise by default, it will go with all. And you, based on your requirement, you have to allow which database you need access for that client. Okay. And here you have the IP address, okay? And you can define the range of IP address which you need to allow from the client, and the net marks, which means the CIDR format, you have to define based on your range of IP. For example, it will not allow 32 series in 0.0, right, series. So you have to define 24. It depends on what type of IP class it falls and how we want to allow. Based on that, you have to define whether it belongs to 32 net mask or 24. Okay, that range of specific IP address you can define here, or you can allow all connections. Okay, you can just define 0. If you define 0.0.0.0, which means you are allowing all connections from the outside. Okay. And if you are allowing 192.168.1.0/24, you are allowing that only that series. Okay, like this you have to define. Or you don't want to allow set of range, you want to allow a specific IP, you can only define that specific IP in the IP address column of HBA.conf. Yeah, this is important. Okay, authentication methods. So we have different authentication methods like trust, reject, password. Okay, by default it will be trust. Whenever you initialize the cluster, it is a trust. Trust means it will you are allowing connections without a password. Okay, it will not ask any password when you have algorithm trust. Okay, and if you want to reject the connections, you can add reject algorithm. So no users can connect to the database. Okay, for example, if you're doing any activities and you don't want the connections to allow, then you can define the reject, so all the connections will get rejected. Like you are stopping listener, right, for doing any activity. Similarly, you can just do add reject, so connections will not allow. Okay, this is reject algorithm. And you have password algorithm. So when you define password, it will ask the password, but this password is not encrypted in the network. Okay, so you have to keep in mind. So even though if you use password, it is not secure. Okay, so trust is not secure, password is not secure. Okay, MD5 is algorithm. Most of the people will use MD5 and Scrumshat 256. These are the two popular algorithms, and it's recommended to use these two algorithms in real time, because this will ask the password, and it also encrypted in the network. Okay, this MD5 is one of the algorithm. When you define the host-based authentication as MD5, it will ask the password of users. Okay.
And what password they have to enter, like regarding
whatever user they are logging to the database, that user will have a password, right? That password they have to enter.
okay.
If you are defining trust, even they don't need to enter the password, we directly connect. Okay, that is the reason Postgres, whenever you initialize the Postgres cluster, it has given a warning. Okay, so you have to change this later point of time as a DBA. So we'll discuss step by step, like once you build a cluster, what are the things you need to change in the cluster? Okay, you directly not hand over to the application team, right? You have to do some settings, like you have to allow connections, you have to change few parameters, you have to schedule backups and so on, right? So this is the default configuration. When you build a cluster, later point of time, you have to change these algorithms. Okay, the recommended algorithm is MD5. Scrumshat 256 is still secure. Okay, this is a very strong password password complexity. Okay, you can use the Scrumshat 256 once you build. Okay, I think even when you do with M installation, by default it will pick Scrumshat 256 in higher versions. Okay, so that we'll see. So Scrumshat 256 and MD5 are the two recommended algorithms to use in real-time systems, because the password, it will ask the password, and it will also encrypt in the network. And we also have ident. Okay, this we use whenever you want to map your OS user, okay, to database user. You have to define this ident, okay, so that it will authenticate with the OS password whenever you are logging, right? So that this is what you have to use whenever you want to allow any OS user. In the HBA.conf, you have to use this ident algorithm, okay, so that it will authenticate your OS password to the database password. And you also define that particular IP from where the user is connecting, or some set of range IP also you can define in HBA.conf. Okay. So Yeah, this is the example what I'm explaining. Okay, so there is a user. Okay, you are mapping that OS user to the database user. You have to define an ident.conf as well as you have to allow in hp.conf with ident algorithm. Okay, these are the steps to modify hp.conf. Whatever changes you did in the hp.conf, you require a bounce. Okay, you require a restart to affect the value. So first you need to stop the Postgres cluster, add entry in hp.conf, and you can change algorithms. Okay, strong algorithms from default trust to MD5 or strong SHA 256, depending on your requirement. Okay, and you also need to allow the IP addresses, and there is a parameter called listen_address in PostgreSQL.conf. You also need to allow here. Okay, by default it is a local host. If you are not allowing this, remote connections will not able to connect. Okay, and then you can start your cluster, and you can check the connectivity from your client whether he is able to connect or not after you do these changes. These are the steps you have to follow. Okay.
But do we need to really like shut down the PostgreSQL from the machine?
No, you can directly.
We can just reload it. We can just edit it and we can reload it, right?
No, reload will not work. You have to restart the cluster. hp.conf, you have to restart your cluster definitely. Reload will not work because whatever the changes you do in hp.conf, you require a restart. So directly you open the hp.conf in vEditor, you can change and you can restart your cluster. Okay, this is a good practice. Stop the cluster, edit the value, okay, and restart the cluster and start the cluster. This is a good practice.
Yeah, just adding to Suresh, like this one pg_hpa.conf is like cluster level file. Okay, so like in the production system, if you're doing anything on like these kind of configuration files at cluster level, the graceful shutdown and the graceful start will be much needed. Okay, so that's why we need to gracefully shut down and do the modification and perform the restart. Then like the values will be applicable. It will affect. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we will see practically also, you will understand better. Okay. And this is a PG tune, most popular, widely used tune. Okay. So this PG tune is open source third-party tool where you can able to even PostgreSQL.org, right? So community also recommended to use this because this will give you the best settings, okay, based on your requirement. For example, you have built a new cluster. Okay, after that, you have to change necessary parameters based on your system resources. So you use this tool and you can enter which version of your database you are using and whether it's a Linux or Windows and what type of application you are using. If it's a web-based or OLTP or OLAP, you have to give that specific application and what is the memory of your system, whether it's a 32 GB or 16 GB, you have to give that memory details, a number of CPUs, and number of connections you want to allow. Okay, and your storage is SSD. If you just fill these details and if you just give generate, it will give the necessary recommended parameters, mandatory parameters that need to be changed based on your configuration settings, your system resources. It will give the recommendations, especially the shared buffers, effective cache size, okay, and wall buffers, work mem. These are the important parameters we need to consider, right? For after you build a cluster, you have to change this. Okay, so this is the best tool in market based on your hardware configurations. It will give the recommendations of your parameters. Okay, you can change these parameters as per this tool. Okay, this is the most popular tool. We also have some other tools also as well, but this is the most popular tool. Even we will show okay how this tool will work. Any questions before we jump into practical part?
So I have one question with reference to this tool. Does it, this is only for the initial testing or is it for based on the workload, does it provide recommendations?
Oh, no, this is initial configuration settings. Once you build a cluster, based on your settings, based on your hardware configurations, it will recommend you these parameters, but later point of time, maybe after 2 years or 5 years, based on your requirement, you have to again do some benchmark test and you have to change this. This is just an initial configuration. Later point of time, based on your load of your system, you will, for example, here we have defined 50 connections, and maybe in future it will have more connections. So based on that, you can change it later. But is this tool is essentially good for, to change these parameters.
Yeah, just adding to Suresh Malati. Okay, so whenever if you're building any new system, okay, like if you think about Oracle, okay, you are Oracle DB, right? Whenever if you're like planning to build a Oracle database class, it may be rack or it is maybe standalone machine. So you will do the proper the capacity planning, right? Okay, then only so you will get allocate the resources for your we can say Oracle or Oracle any databases. Okay, in the similar way here also do the proper capacity planning. Okay, what is the growth of your application for next 5 years or next 10 years. Okay, application team will confirm. Okay, and how much of data it is readed, what it is it a transactional database, analytical database. Okay, how many transactions we can expect. Okay, and which type of transaction we can get in. Okay, so based on that, okay, so we can choose here OLAP or OLTP. Okay, so we can choose it and how much of storage it is required to store that particular data. Okay. So we can do the proper capacity planning before we enter all those details here. Okay. And it will give the recommendation. But just to keep a note, if we enter something here, okay, it is give the accuracy of almost 90 to 95%. Okay, but later point of view, based on the behavior, based on the load test and everything, okay, you can change the parameters. Not like everything, you can do something from your side. Means you can choose some amount of parameter values from your side. Hope it is clear for you, Malati.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, these parameters they have defined based on the community recommendation. Okay, if you go and read in the community, for example, shared_buffer. Okay, they have recommended, for example, community recommended to use 25% of your RAM. You have to allocate to shared buffers. So based on that only, they have defined. Okay. So for example, if you add, okay, if you see 24 GB, effective cache size is the other memory. Okay, this memory comes under all the parameters, all the other buffers. Okay, apart from shared buffer. 32 GB I have mentioned here. In the 32 GB, 25% is 8 GB and 24 GB is the remaining. So if you add both effective cache size and this, you will get this memory. So this is 25%. This is how they calculate. Okay, even if you go on read in the community PostgreSQL.org documents, they will mention it's recommended to give 25% to the shared buffers. And maybe in the future, based on the load, you can increase from 25% to 30% or 35%. Okay, so it depends on your load. In future, you can change, but initially 25% is more than enough for shared buffers because Postgres is a process oriented. You need more amount of memory to OS, okay, than shared buffers because each and every session will have a dedicated backend process, which backend process have that we call it as a virtual memory. It has its own work memory and maintenance work memory and temp buffers, right? So it requires for sorting and matching. So that is the reason we give more amount of memory to OS. Okay, this is the setting parameters we can change. Important mandatory parameters we can change based on your hardware resources. Okay, so let's discuss a few things before we go to parameter file changes. Okay, so I have my cluster running. So if you go to PG data location, I have pghp.conf, postgresql.conf, and I also have auto.conf. I also have ident.conf, and this is a PG version, and postmaster.opt and postmaster.pad. It will just store the PAD, postmaster PAD. Okay, and this is postmaster OPTS. So whenever you start the cluster, postmaster will write entry. The last, let me show this. Okay, so this is the last command which I used, right, to start the cluster. It will just save this, and it will also have the PAD. Okay, so localhost and this is the PID and connection is ready. So just make an entries here and this is hpa.conf. Okay, so before I go and discuss about hpa.conf, we can just discuss few more things. Okay, so here pSQL, right? So pSQL is the command line utility to connect to your database, right? So if you just give --help, you will get bulk options, like much options. pSQL, when I just give pSQL, okay, you are just connecting to the default Postgres database and default Postgres user. So by default, this Postgres user doesn't have any password. Okay, you have to set, whenever you initialize the cluster, first you have to set the password for Postgres user because this is a super user. This is how you can change the password. Okay, password Postgres. So I'm going to give the password for this user. Okay. So when you give pSQL, it will connect to, let me do like this. Select current underscore user. Okay, currently I connected to Postgres user and currently I connected to which database? Postgres database, or you can say /c. It will give which database and which user you connected, or you can also give connection info. Okay, either views you can use current user, current database, or /c. It will give which user you connected. Okay, and for example, if I want to connect, okay, from any of your remote missions, okay, for example, let me take pgadmin. So pgadmin is one of the tool, okay, most of the developers and DBS will use. This is like same like SQL developer and tool. Okay, so if I want to connect from any other tool, we'll see whether it will allow a connections or not from pgadmin. I have a Postgres user and I also have password. I want to connect with this Postgres user from pgadmin. Okay, so by default, it will not ask any, by default, it will not allow any kind of users from remote. So we'll see how we can.
Yeah, meanwhile, this app starts. How do you find start time from pSQL prompt? Uptime, or when was the
You meant to say the
started?
Yeah, we have PG underscore database. You can able to query there. Okay. Yeah, I will show that. Don't worry. Okay. So in the servers, I'm going to register this connection here. For example, I want to connect to, I can give any name. Okay. So my PG, and here I want to define my IP. This is my IP. So I'm using this and I have port 5432. I want to connect database Postgres and user Postgres. So I'm going to give the password. Just try to connect it. So what it is telling, it is not able to allow connections. It is telling timeout, right? Even it is not allowing any connections. Why? Because you have to, once you build a cluster, okay, you have to allow PostgreSQL.conf. Okay, this is a parameter file. You have a parameter called listener address. Okay. By default, this is a local host, which means only local machine can able to connect from remote. Any client you cannot. Okay, you have to allow this. You can just use star, which means you are allowing a remote connections, and you can just uncomment the port. Okay, so you have to allow this parameter. Okay, so let's save this and let's do restart. Okay, I have restarted my cluster and let me check this session again. Now whatever you are getting, unable to connect to the server, connection failed, no pghpa.conf entry for host 1.14. Okay, so which means you have to allow that connection. Okay, so pghpa.conf, right? So let's go and do this pg_hpa.conf. And so by default it is a trust, right? So we can change to MD5. So I'm just allowing all users. And for example, I want to allow 192.168.1.0 this series, and algorithm is MD5. Okay, so let me restart the cluster again. So now you connected, right? This is how now I could see all the databases, whatever I have. This is how you have to allow. Okay, that's why whenever you build any new cluster, the first thing is you have to allow remote connections, and you have to set the password for user Postgres, because by default you don't have any password for the Postgres user. You have to set the password of the Postgres, and then you, based on the client requirement, you have to allow the connections and all the necessary parameters, whatever you require. Okay, you have to change that. Any doubts here?
Hey, not related to the connection, the Postgres conf, it will have all the available parameters commented out in the beginning.
Yeah, we only few basic parameters it will enable. I mean, later point of time, we need to change all these parameters. Okay. So for example, okay, if you see max underscore
So
connection.
by default, it comes with all the available parameters.
Yeah, by default, it has all parameters, but only few mandatory parameters it will enable. Okay, but later, once you build a cluster, DB has to change all the necessary parameters. Okay, for example, the basic memory configurations it will enable. Okay, otherwise remaining all it is commented, and it will also clearly mention this is the default value. Okay, when you change this, it requires restart. Change requires restart. And even we can find from pg_settings whether it's a static parameter or dynamic parameter. Even we can check.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, any doubts here? Yeah.
No doubts from my end apart from that time.
Yeah. So now, okay, so I want to show a few more things. Okay, so this is my IP address, right? So I'm trying to connect with this 1.168. Okay, so it is asking password. Why? Because I have enabled MD5, right? Previously, it is not asking any password. So since I have enabled MD5 as algorithm, okay, it is asking the password for user to enter, right? So you have, if you just use psql-help, okay, it will have the bunch of options. See, for local connections, you don't need to, connect any of your, you don't need to use any of your settings, okay? But if you want to connect from remote machine, you can use this -h option and port and username and password, okay? So like this, you have to do, like this, you have to change the settings based on your requirement. Okay, so you have bulk of options. You try to explore each option, how we can connect. So by default, if you connect pSQL, okay, it is not asking any password, right? Because local connection is a trust. If you see in hpa.conf, local connection is trust. That is the reason it is not asking any password. If I use host with this some set of range IP, then algorithm is MD5. The previous which I have connected, right, with the set of this IP range. So then it will ask the password because it's an MD5 algorithm. Okay. Okay, so and once you connect it to pSQL, and for example, if you just give slash and question mark. Okay, before this, I also give some set. Okay, this is the default settings of your cluster. If you just give slash set, and you could see auto commit is by default on. Okay, and the default database it connects to Postgres, and default user it connects to Postgres. And this is important. Okay, in Postgres, auto commit is on by default. If you don't want auto commit, you can just change this. Okay, auto commit to off. So these are the default environment settings for the Postgres cluster. If you just use slash set, it will give all the default settings. Default port is 5432, default database Postgres. By default, it is auto commit, and it is UTF-8 character set by default. Okay, these are all the default environment settings for this cluster and version. And it also shows the Linux platform and everything. Now, if you just use slash and question mark, this is kind of help command. So whatever the commands which you want, okay. For example, if you want to do the list of databases, okay, slash L, slash D, list of tables, slash DT, slash DA, okay, for aggregations. And if you want to list the table space, slash DP, and if you want to list of your views, slash DV, slash DU rows, slash DT tables, sequences, okay, to list of these queries. So this is a help command. Okay, this have like much options. If you don't know what command you have to execute to list of tables, you can just give slash question mark, and it will give all the information. For example, you want to know connection details, slash C, connection info. If you want to change securely password, slash password. Okay, these are all the options you have in the databases. Okay, and for example, okay, let me slash hedge. So if you want to manage the cluster, like for example, you want to create, you want to alter any table, okay, you want to know more details, you can just give slash hedge. It will give all the create statements. You want to know more about, for example, create schema. So it will give the syntax, create schema, schema name, okay, authorized, what is the role name, and how you have to create the syntax. So slash question mark and slash hedge are very useful commands for the newcomers, okay, who want to learn Postgres newly. These two are very important. It helps you for understand. If you don't know any command, it will give you, okay. So these both commands you can just remember, and it's easy for you, okay. And okay, and you asked me when is the last restart, right? So I have so when is the postmaster restart time? Okay, this is the function where you can use PG postmaster start function. It will give when was the last restart time. Okay, this is how you can find. Yeah, so probably tomorrow what we can do, we can also discuss more about how to change the parameter, static parameter and dynamic parameter. And we can also add some few things in the hpa.conf, and we see different scenarios, okay? So that's it we have for today. If you don't have any questions, then we can close today's session. So today, like only we have discussed about the theoretical part of parameter file management and hpa.conf, and practical we'll discuss tomorrow. This is just help commands which I want to show, and once you initialize the cluster, how you want to allow any connections. Okay, from remote, you have to keep in mind listen underscore address is one of the important. You have to allow that, and you also need to allow hpa.conf. So we have seen one example how you want to connect from remote machine or remote client, anything. Okay, so any questions today? So tomorrow we'll discuss practical part about parameter file management and hpa.conf, and we can also see one scenario of ident.conf, how we can allow OS users. Any questions?
And Suresh, we already discussed about regarding the sharing the content, whichever you couldn't able to share the PPT, but you guys have said you will be sharing some document right at the end of the session, some important things. So will you be able to forward that?
See, for each and everything we cannot share, right? So we will share. Okay, so based on the topic, okay, still we are in the basics, I mean, in the starting, right? So this is just all theoretical. Even if you go and read in the PostgreSQL.org, okay, it will give what is a shared memory and what is this. But from important concepts, definitely we will provide some theoretical part as well, okay, in the lab manual itself. Okay. So, but each and everything we cannot share actually, right? So this is theoretical part, right? Architecture we cannot share like each and.
So far you guys are sharing only the lab manual. Apart from that, we didn't get anything for the important task as well. That's what I'm highlighting.
Yes, for coming topics, definitely we will share. This up to here we just discuss architecture and what is PG data, right? That does not have any much importance. That is just a basic content even you can get from PostgreSQL.org. Okay, so that's what we mean to say. But definitely for important concepts and important things we will share.
Gopi, I think you already came from other batch also, right? You know, right? So we are not going to share any content. Okay, so that you know, right?
So that I know, Siraj, but you also said that you try to share some important things, right? That's what I'm asking.
The points, even please allow some time also to prepare the content for that. Okay, so we are occupied with many things. Okay, so we will share some of the content useful for you. Okay, not the slides. Okay, you will get it. Don't worry.
Yeah, fine. And one more request, whenever we are discussing some topic, right? And the same time, if you are if there are any interview questions or any some important things, if you guys are sharing means so that we can have a note, so that we can make
related to interview questions and all these things. Okay, so we have the end of the entire this particular course, we have the content. Okay, for interview questions, but even whenever we are discussing suppose vacuuming, okay, we will say so these are the important things. We will get it in interview thing. Okay, you will get it. We will notify you in each and every topic. Okay, that is, and we have separate content also for the interview questions. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.